Hi, you guys. We are back with part 2 of the feminization of the West and how it has impacted everything down to your dating life, down to obviously your life in your workplace, HR departments, all the rest of it. Helen Andrews wrote a paper a few days ago, and it is just blowing up. And I want everybody to read it, see this video. It's just truly enlightening and really skillful at the way she's calling us out without giving women and the simps who enable them a way to attack it. And like I said in part 1, I'm not sure that was intentional all the way to make it so you can't attack, but I think it might have been because of the way she has studied wokeism. So without further ado, and by the way, sorry, if you haven't seen part 1, it's okay. It's okay. Watch this one and then go back and watch part 1. All right? Welcome back to Far From Eden. Right back in where we left off. Like I said, don't worry. You can watch part 1 after this. It's not going to take you at all because you're already living this, right? It's not like you're like need to be explained. Like what is a woman? You're going to know. You're going to recognize this behavior, how it plays out. So let's go.
And kind of fudge the rules to get their way to the outcome that they want. And that's whether or not you accept that's true of men and women in general, certainly in this case, the women ignored the off-the-record rule, took Larry Summers' quotes to a feminist journalist, and stirred this up into a massive national scandal.
Okay, so that's the president of Harvard. He said, do you want the nice version or do you want the, academic happy version? And all he did was say, hey, women are more likely to have conflict in the ways that they, it's going to tell you, I think. So she's better off to say it. It was basically all the things that it was more about, it was more about the sciences and would they be likely to go into science? Why are they underrepresented in science, right? It's because, they don't want to do it and they don't have the aptitude. It was supposed to be off the record, but it wasn't. And all that's true. And we know it's true. And maybe it's why it inflames us so badly. How dare you, right? But it's true. And it's exactly what Jordan Peterson said when he was first rising to fame and popularity. And it was controversial then too. This guy said this in 2005. And I think there's a reason I've never heard of him. They got to shut all this down. She talked about, who shuts people up in conflict? Who says, no, you can't say that? It's wokeism. But also, who's done it in your life to you? Who won't engage in the argument, but will just call you a narcissist or an abuser or this, that, or the other? You disrespected me. There, you're caught up.
And the thing that was so dismaying for those of us who remember watching it unfold at the time is that these women who were trying to get Larry Summers fired, and as they eventually did not offer any arguments. They did not try and say that what Larry Summers said was wrong on the facts. What they said in the quotes that they gave to the New York Times was, I was so offended I couldn't even breathe. I had to leave or I would have passed out. And I'm sitting there thinking, you're not really beating the allegations that you're emotional rather than rational, ladies. Feminist hysteria managed to unseat one of the most powerful people in the United States from one of the most valuable positions simply on the basis of being offended without even trying to argue that what he had said was wrong.
So by that,
they'll divorce you over that and say it's your fault. You said something true. You had a disagreement. Well, I can't even believe you're like that.
Account, the ousting of Larry Summers was a sort of early example of this. Not only was it about the differences between men and women, it epitomized the differences between men and women. But I just got to push back a little bit, I feel, on behalf of those of our listeners who might be not enjoying this. First of all, are you sure that they were all women involved in the ousting of Larry Summers? I feel like if you did a full forensic study, there's bound to be some blokes involved in that story.
Yes, and in fact, there is a journalist, I believe, named Richard Bradley, who wrote a book about Larry Summers' tenure as president of Harvard. And it is important to state for the record that over 1 year elapsed between the speech he gave that got him in so much trouble and his eventual resignation. It is also important to stipulate that there were many, many other controversies that Larry Summers got himself into in the course of his Harvard presidency. He antagonized powerful members of the faculty. He antagonized the Black Studies department and kind of put his foot in it politically there as well, and made various budget changes that people didn't like. Larry Summers, if you don't know him,
Right.
he's famously a guy who's pretty brash and blunt and not in it. He's not here to make friends.
Yeah, but is that a feminized way to look at it? Or is that what a guy does who thought, I'm going to clean house at Harvard? Maybe he saw wokeism coming. I'm just saying, I'm giving the other side of it. Because it sounds like it to me. Sounds like to me he was onto a lot of truth. And I'm not going to address some of the things she said that he did, because I have thoughts on that too. But I'm going to keep that for locals. Yeah, of course. I'm surprised that they didn't set him up in some kind of a, scandal, a fake scandal, something like that, Anyway, they will remove people. They're not having as much luck at it now, though, because many of us are sick and tired of being called names, and it doesn't shut us up anymore.
Larry Summers is. So certainly there were many controversies that led to his eventual resignation. He was not fired, he resigned. But I think a fair assessment would say that the remarks about women in science were the straw that broke the camel's back. If you had to name one thing that caused his resignation, that would be the one thing people would pick.
I said that some people were upset by your essay. One such person was Kathy Young over at the Bullock. We haven't asked her on the show, so let me read out some of her remarks and you can respond to them. She says, Andrews has waded into this morass with an ultra-simplistic message for those on the right. Everything they hate in modern American culture can be blamed on women, or at least on women's social and political empowerment and their large-scale entry into public life. That message seems to be quite popular. Andrews' talk was reportedly the big hit of NatCon. You did a speech kind of version of this at the National Conservatism Conference, and the video got 170,000 views. So she's saying you're just bashing on, you're beating up on women, you're blaming women for everything that's wrong with the world, and it's a cheap shot and it's not fair, and she doesn't recognize it, and she's pissed. What do you say to Kathy?
Kathy Young has become one of my most dedicated haters. Anytime I write anything, controversial or otherwise, she tends to pop up from the lob peanuts from the cheap seats. So, hi, Kathy. Thank you for being my most dedicated reader. In terms of the substance of her argument, I think the most important response I would give is this. Other people who are skeptical of feminism, going back all the way to Phyllis Schlafly, took gender differences as their starting point and then asked, given that these are the differences between men and women, what are likely to be the changes in our institutions? How is this likely to play out if institutions tip to being majority female? The important thing about the article I wrote and the position I am taking is that I did not take gender differences as my starting point. I began with the observation that our institutions changed radically in 2020. Wokeness really did mark a significant departure in how our institutions function.
Awesome. She's so smart. She's like, I didn't start out that way. So you can't, it's harder to attack, right? She started out with, hey, look at these changes over here, which you kind of have to agree with. She started out with a point that you have to agree with. This lady is smart. And she's on our side. I'm so excited.
So given this huge, unprecedented, otherwise inexplicable massive social change called wokeness,
Right.
what could possibly be the explanation for that?
Right.
So I didn't start with gender differences and saying men and women are different, therefore I think more ladies is going to be a disaster. I started with observing a disaster and asking what could possibly explain it. And I think that the most
Beautiful.
simple explanation is feminization.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and you come up with some quite convincing dates here. Law schools became majority female in 2016. The New York Times, as you mentioned, became majority female in 2018. Medical schools became majority female in 2019. And overall, the college-educated workforce became majority female in 2019.
Wow.
A lot of people, I think, women or men, would hear those statistics and feel like that was something to celebrate. They might say, okay, maybe the way that these institutions work has changed. Maybe there are some negative aspects to that. But overall, it's a positive because it means greater participation. It means they will reflect the communities they're serving better, etc. You know what the arguments are. Do you also see some positives in the additional presence of women in the workplace?
No.
It depends on the field. I think there are some fields that are very much enhanced by female representation. I am basing my judgments of whether increasing feminization is a good thing or a bad thing based not on speculation about how I think women tend to be, but on observation about how increasing feminization has affected these institutions so far. In the case of the field of law, that is one area where I see the areas of law that are most female dominated, including law revolving around sexual assault and the Me Too movement. And in the case of campus courts to adjudicate cases of sexual assault, the so-called Title IX courts that arose under President Obama, that is kind of a sort of perfect experiment. That's a legal system designed by women according to feminist principles. And I observe how those courts played out in practice. And I think, well, gosh, these Title IX courts for sexual assault on college campuses were just railroading a lot of innocent guys who got caught up in ambiguous situations. So there were many injustices committed.
And they took those cases that a lot of times were just false, and they put them all out in the media so that other women would think like that and think that was the case and think, oh yeah, that's how men are. So it had even greater implications than the people who were involved in it.
By these courts, they don't seem to have the safeguards that I think are really important. These were courts designed to believe women and protect women, and yet they tended to do more harm than good. And then during the Me Too movement, what we saw, certainly in America, was many of those same legal principles and habits from the campus courts that existed on universities being applied to actual legal cases of sexual assault prosecutions in the real grown-up courts, things like the Harvey Weinstein trial and all the rest of it. And there was a tendency in those Me Too cases, certainly in how they were covered in the press, and even a little bit how they were dealt with in courts of law.
Harvey Weinstein's innocent, by the way. He's an immoral man. He's an adulterer, but he's innocent. He's factually innocent. Look into it if you want to. He's innocent.
That seemed to me to be inching closer and closer to the problems and the pathologies that were observable in the Title IX courts for sexual assault on college campuses. So that's a case where I am just observing as a fact about the world that I can see with my own eyes that increasingly feminized legal areas or types of courts tend to function in ways that I don't like, that I think are bad. To be clear, there are some people who thought the Title IX courts on college campuses were great, who thought they were pillars of feminism. They were really sad when President Trump got rid of them. But I think they were bad. I think they were kangaroo courts. And I think if our actual legal system comes to resemble them, that will be really bad for America and for anybody who has to live under the rule of law. So that's my position.
So specifically in the example of Me Too, any particular case, what you would say is the more feminine response would be solidarity with the apparent victim and perhaps more of an emotional need to protect that potential victim. Meanwhile, the masculine response would be more sort of comfortable with a controversial outcome and more interested in evidence. I mean, it sounds very nice to men and not very nice to women, this. You know, you yourself, Helen, are a wonderful example of exactly not this. If you are a woman and you're listening to this and you're thinking to yourself, why is this clearly very articulate and intelligent lady kind of caricaturizing women as these sort of emotional creatures? What would you say to those listeners?
Let's leave the realm of law and go to the realm of politics. And I'm sure you know that we could not get to the end of this conversation without mentioning Margaret Thatcher at least once.
It is her 100th birthday this past week, so appropriate.
I think one result of the increasing feminization of politics is a decline in legislative or parliamentary repartee, parliamentary heckling. It used to be quite common in your legislature in Great Britain for people in the House of Commons to heckle each other and shout at each other and have rude one-liners. And really, the parliamentary debate was an art. And I think I think most people would agree that that art has declined. Some of that, I believe, is a tendency to adopt feminine modes of rhetoric, which are less friendly to the sort of conflict-oriented repartee that characterized parliamentary debate in the early part of the 20th century.
Wow.
Now, Margaret Thatcher, among her many strengths, was parliamentary repartee. She could take heckling with the best of them. She would not break down and cry or give an emotional response when somebody shouted something from across the other side. So we can't say that women are bad at parliamentary debate or that they can't deal with or can't handle heckling, because Margaret Thatcher was quite good at it. Nevertheless,
we can't say it because there are exceptions. I don't mind her saying that, because we have to be able to say this out loud and be slippery enough that they can't, it's harder for them to call us names or accuse us of being hateful towards women or something like that, because obviously it's not. Saying this is not where we shine is not hateful at all. And secondly, look at all the things we say about men and to men. Seriously, it's way over the line. It's not about, well, this is where a man shines the best, and this is where we need him, and this is where maybe it's not his. You can say all that, but you can't say it about women. But if you let it be known that there are plenty of exceptions without even saying the word exception, then the women will let you speak, because they'll be able to say, oh, well, yeah, I'm one of those. I'm a Margaret Thatcher. No, you're not, but okay.
If you have a parliament that is majority female, I mean, the House of Commons is not majority female at this time. Not yet. It probably will be someday. But if you have a parliament in which women have 1/3 representation or greater, your style of debate will become more feminized, and that will be less friendly to the kind of debate that used to occur. So there's just a huge difference between saying any individual woman, like Margaret Thatcher, might be talented in certain male or historically male fields of endeavor. That's fine. But if your entire legislature becomes predominantly female, that will have a change in what kinds of rhetoric you adopt. And that will be determined not by exceptional women who happen to flourish or be talented at the old male modes of debate, but that will be determined by the average woman in your legislature and the general tendency of the female sex and how it tends to argue. So there's just a huge difference between individuals and groups and generalizations.
A lot of people here in the UK would celebrate that again, I think. In fact, you hear it very often, that Parliament needs to get over the old boys club, Oxford debating society atmosphere, which alienates ordinary voters. That's normally the phrase you hear. And they're delighted that the discourse is a little bit more comprehensible and straightforward, or fact-based or substantial or whatever. What? Do you take a different view then? You think we should be trying to get back to that more rambunctious style?
I absolutely do. And in that case, I think it's important for anyone to always separate your own preferences from what is objectively good or bad. It's certainly the case that I prefer the old rambunctious style of debate. But I like to think that I'm able to separate these things and step back and say, well, okay, that's what I would prefer, but what is good for democracy? What is good for the country? And having thought about it and attempted to be objective, I think it's true that the old Ramoksha style of debate was better able to handle conflict. Another example is university departments. There are lots of people who look at English departments now or history departments now, and they say it's great that history departments are focusing more on traditionally female lines of inquiry. We do more social history now and feminist history now, talking about ordinary people. And we don't do so much military history or kings and queens anymore. That's the old stuff. And I think that the rise of women in history departments has been a big factor in that change. But I look at the kind of social history that these departments produce and I think, well, this is not actually very good. And I think that if you have history departments that don't have any respect for military history or traditionally male fields of history, that's bad. And then I will stand on this position resolutely. I think that is not just a matter of my own personal preference of the kinds of history that I like to read, but I think that's, objectively true of history departments in general. We have lost something if history departments become feminized, when parliamentary debate becomes feminized, when all of these things become feminized.
Especially because they don't teach real history. They don't teach the real history of feminism. They don't teach that. They teach the kids that matriarchal societies in the past flourished and were successful. They really do.
The institutions just don't work as well.
The big question, I think, Helen Andrews, and the one I want to conclude with is, what do we do about it? So let's just say we're with you on the proposition that you observe this shift. If you want to get back to a more rational or different way of being, I guess there are two options. One is that you reverse the great feminization and you start excluding or aiming to weight down the number of women in key positions in key institutions. I can't see that being a very popular option, but there must be one. Or I suppose you have to insist that the women that do take part in those institutions can play by the old rules and stick to, what you would call more masculine ways of being. Are they the two options as you see it? And if so, which do you prefer?
No, I have a third option, which I will propose in a moment. But just to address the option number 2 there, that is one that is very attractive to a lot of people. You say, okay, feminization is bad, but we'll just tell all the ladies that they have to keep playing by the old rules. That is not a viable solution.
It's not going to work.
Because if you have a legal profession that is 60% male, then you can insist that the 40% play by your old rules. But once women are 60% of the legal profession, you can try and say, we need to stick to the old rules.
No.
But if they're the demographic majority, they're just going to say, no, we're going to change the rules to what we prefer.
And if the women are raising the men, the boys and everything, and they're in charge of the raising, those men in particular will be more feminized themselves. They will interact with the world a little bit more the way women do. So that's a little of my 2 cents.
And there's really no way to set up any barriers to prevent them from doing that.
Okay, so option 2 is out.
So option 3 is all I am proposing. And the reason why I think it should be so easy for everyone to get on board with this is fairness. Right now, there is a massive thumb on the scale in favor of women in almost every institution. And this is one of the few things I say in the piece that is genuinely controversial and subject to sincere debate. I believe that the great feminization is artificial. It is the result of social engineering. It is not just the result of women organically out-competing men in the fields of the academy or business.
No.
It is because of incentives to hire more women and promote more women that are the result of laws that have been passed in the United States.
Yes.
So I think that if we simply get rid of all of the hiring targets that currently exist at large corporations, saying that you have to have a certain proportion of your employees be female.
Right.
If we get rid of the legal protections that exist around feminization in terms of HR that say you can't have a masculine atmosphere at your workplace because having a having a bro club atmosphere in your workplace is currently illegal. A woman who's in that workplace can sue her employer saying, I feel like success at my office is determined by how well you go along with being one of the boys. therefore I'm being discriminated against. And a woman who brought that lawsuit would stand a good chance of success. That is a problem, and that leads employers to feminize their workplace to a greater degree than they would otherwise if left to their own devices.
Terrible.
I'm saying leave employees to their own devices.
Yep.
In my perfect world, you will have some workplaces that are more masculine, some that are more feminized, and the world's big enough for everybody. Everyone can find a workplace to suit their own preferences. But right now, there are many thumbs on this.
The women will go home and choose to raise their kids with their husband, in charge of all that other stuff and in charge of how, this is what our family believes and what we're going to do. And if you want to be my wife, you will also believe those things. I don't mean that you'll come to me and I'll make you believe those things. It's just that those are the ones that I will choose to be my wife. And, it's all well and good when you're playing the game and you have different rules. So you're winning. But when you are forced to play by the same rules, you might not want to be in that game anymore. And that's why men are walking away. But the women will say, you know what, I think I'm more suited for a different game, a different activity. And I love the way she prefaced it and said it's about fairness. Because I was thinking to myself, fairness, it gives me, thoughts of egalitarian and whatever. So I thought she was going down, a woman's way of thinking. But she didn't. She started talking about meritocracy. But she encased it in the fairness rule, because that is what's actually fair. What a lot of people nowadays, and it's men too, not the majority of them, certainly not the masculine way of thinking, is that fairness, as far as egalitarianism, we all have this and we all get this and we're all equal in that sense. That's a pipe dream. That's for teaching a kindergarten class. That is not for ordering society. But I love that she prefaced it by saying fairness, because she is insulating herself from those who would come for her and attack her. She has built in a defense to her whole stance. Brilliant. I am learning a lot just from listening to her, watching her, on how I can go forth and present these things while, embedding a defense to those who will come and attack me, because I know what they're going to say. She's brilliant. And whether you realize it or not, you probably do if you've been watching up to this point. In this way, it's advocacy for men. Because everything that she's talking about is what silences you. It's what, accuses you and sues you, puts you in jail, etc. Can't do that under this lovely lady's worldview.
Scale, both legal and social, to try and increase female representation. I think if we get rid of those thumbs on the scale and return to gender neutrality, gender fairness, pure meritocracy in this respect, then I think the great feminization problem will take care of itself.
It will.
So that's why I don't think of myself as controversial. All I am proposing is a return to fairness.
Well, the idea of fairness, I think, is not controversial, but the result that you think it will have, which would be, by your own predictions, a rolling back or a reversal of the increased presence of women in the judiciary, in politics, in the legal profession, in the scientific community, in the academy even, would basically result in a much diminished voice for women in the institutions that wield the most power. Are you comfortable with that outcome?
Well, first of all, that's what I predict. There are many people who predict otherwise. Many people who say you can get rid of all the affirmative action programs that women enjoy at the moment, and the great feminization will roll on unencumbered. It will continue because women are just out-competing the men. I think there are...
Then you wouldn't need affirmative action. What are you even talking about? Then you wouldn't need quotas. Seriously?
Many feminists who have that position. my position is let's see what happens. I predict things will go
let's see what
otherwise.
happens.
But assuming that I am
Oh.
right in my prediction about what would occur if we did return to total fairness, I am myself a woman, so I want women to be able to pursue careers and have voices. But on the other hand, I'm also a citizen of the United States, and I want my democratic debate, I want the debates in Congress to be debates that I can be proud of, to adhere to norms of rationality rather than emotionality. I'm someone who has kids, and I will eventually send my children to universities. I want the universities they go to not be hives of woke insanity. I may, God forbid, one day find myself in a courtroom. I would like for that courtroom to operate according to rules of rationality and law rather than rules of which side of the conflict is more sympathetic.
So you're saying that rolling back this feminization is good for women? You mean it's not good for women to push them all into the workforce and into leadership roles where they're unsuited? Are you saying that that could lead to higher rates of depression in women and higher rates of SSRIs? And women who are older mourning the fact that they never had children? Oh, how dare you!
So in so many ways, I depend on the institutions of society functioning as they are designed to. And if feminization is an obstacle to that, then I think I have an interest in seeing that feminization rolled back. Whatever, whether I'm a woman or not, I'm also a citizen and so many other things in addition.
Helen Andrews, thank you so much. I'm sure we'll get quite a few comments under this one, but it was an absolute pleasure to hear from you.
Thanks very much, Freddie.
Fantastic. She is a master. First of all, she's telling the truth. Second of all, the way she's presenting it is just incredibly effective. Incredibly effective. And this is what we need in our society to fix things. If we're ever going to fix any part of it, is we need these voices. And you might say it's too far gone, it's all the way gone, I'm out. Okay, hear me out. Yes, I think that this is the downfall of the American empire, whatever that means. It may be the fall of the West, but I know that we are not all going to be destroyed, right? There will be pockets of people who carry on as they should carry on. They will develop their own systems within their own communities. They will still have families throughout all of time, through the fall of the Roman Empire and all of these times in history, these tumultuous times in history, when empires were falling and societies were falling. They all looked at it like, oh my God, it's the end of the world. It's all over. And yeah, a big part of it was over, but your individual lives were not. Obviously, we're still here, right? So that's why it still matters. Truth will always matter. And she was talking about this will be controversial, etc. And he's like, what didn't get said there is that truth is the truth that's controversial. It's the truth. And some of us know why, because we know where it leads. And it leads right to all that and everything that set forth. And even atheists are realizing, even if they don't believe that all happened exactly as the book says, they realize that ordering society in such a way does the best that we've ever seen. So maintaining that and seeking the truth of that is still beneficial to you. It's beneficial to your soul. If you have children, teaching them that is incredibly important. If you're still determined to find a wife, finding one that understands what she just said is the most important thing. That's the most important thing that you could choose in a wife, because that's a rational thinker. That is a person who understands human nature, right? Both male and female. And when you have that, you have something you can work with. You just do. I saw a ring on her finger. I thought, oh, her husband is very lucky. Very, very lucky. Because that is something you can absolutely work with. And that is someone you could have children with and raise them up. You know what I'm saying? So in that, there is hope. There's always hope. And if you're like me and you never had children, I can have hope in those who have and are doing it the right way. And there are some. So I'm just so excited that I could bring this interview to you. It was long and I needed to comment and share some things because it is, this is a tool for me, this truth and how to present it. It's extremely true. I'm going to watch the interview again, take notes on the things that she said. It's a great move in the right direction. And I can't believe she got away with it. You know what I mean? Like, it's published and, you know, it's getting seen and read. I can't believe she got away with it. But it's because the way she packaged it. Brilliant. So show this to all your favorite feminists. Show this to your daughters. Show this to your sisters. Show this to your ex-wives. Post this on Twitter. Post this on Instagram, on Facebook, everywhere. This is probably these last two videos, probably the most important ones I've ever made. In the message that this Helen Andrews woman is putting out there and the way to present it. So she reminded me a lot of Rachel Wilson, actually, in her demeanor and her way about it. I think Rachel could probably take an insult and have it bounce right off of her, and as I could. So we're the ones out there that need to do battle because the men have been silenced. But they didn't count on us, did they? When they were silencing the men, they didn't think about Rachel Wilson, Pearl Davis, Helen Andrews, me, Lady J. Is that her name? Lady J. It's just so many, right? They didn't count on us. Well, that's bad for them, isn't it? I want you guys to feed your souls with truth. I want you to protect your peace. I love you guys, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.